The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
And now, the promised interview with Arun Venkataraman, Assistant Secretary of Commerce and Director General of the Foreign Commercial Service. He was appointed by President Joe Biden and confirmed by the U.S. Senate on April 7, 2022, to lead the federal government's efforts to promote exports abroad and attract inward investment. He was officially sworn on April 25, 2022. Venkataraman has over 20 years of experience advising companies, international organizations, and the U.S. government on international trade issues. Most recently, he served as counselor of the Secretary of Commerce, advising the Department of Commerce on trade and other international economic matters. Before joining the Biden-Harris administration, Arun was a senior director at Visa, leading global government engagement strategy on a range of international policy issues, including digital economy, trade, tax, and sanctions. He also served as trade and investment policy advisor at Steptoe & Johnson LLP, where he counseled multinational firms and other organizations on e-commerce, intellectual property rights, and U.S. and foreign trade policies. During the Obama administration, Venkataraman served as ITA's first ever director of policy, where he helped shape the U.S. government's responses to critical challenges faced by firms in the U.S. and in markets around the world, including China and India. He also served in the office of the U.S. Trade Representative, where he led the development and implementation of U.S.-India trade policy, for which he received the agency's Kelly Award for outstanding performance and extraordinary leadership. Arun Venkataraman shared his views on the significance of judicial independence, both for political and economic stability and prosperity, rule of law, democracy, and investments, all the analyses you need about Georgia, region, and partnerships.
Welcome to Georgia. Let us start our conversation with the latest news that we heard yesterday, that Mikhail Chinchaladze, Levan Murusidze, and two other judicial officials were sanctioned. The big question is, why now?
Pleasure to be here in Georgia, and thank you for the question. I think what you saw in the decision yesterday is a reflection of our long-standing conversation with our friends in the Georgian government about the importance of an independent judiciary. We've been having this conversation for a long time, and as you know, it's also a part of the 12 priorities that the European Union has laid out for Georgia to achieve candidate status and ultimately accession. And so we see this as a part of that continuing conversation. As you know, having an independent judiciary is critical for Georgia's investment climate, and is probably the single most important step that Georgia can take to improve its investment climate, and we're looking forward to working further with our friends in the Georgian government to do that.
Just to be a little bit more precise, is this decision linked to any precise case, for example, President Saakashvili or Nika Gwarami?
No, this is not about any specific case, and I won't want to get into that any further. I think you heard the Secretary of State yesterday make the announcement and make clear our commitment to working with the Georgian government to improve the state of the judiciary.
So what type of signal is this decision for the court system, for the government, and for me, for the citizens of Georgia as well?
I think the signal that you're seeing is the United States' strong commitment to the Georgian people. It's the Georgian people that want an independent judiciary free from political or other external influence, because that's the type of judiciary that brings them the best benefits, that brings them the democracy, that brings them the investment that the Georgian people want. And so that's what I think you see in this announcement.
The argumentation of this decision was that these individuals abused their public position by engaging in significant corrupt activity. And we've seen also lately USAID's manual featured Georgia, and it highlighted the rising tendency of kleptocracy in Georgia as well. Why such facts, and not even facts, but perceptions, are harmful for Georgia's Euro-Atlantic integration path?
Yes, I think you'll see that democracy rests on a number of critical factors. One of those factors is the people's ability to trust that the judicial branch will operate independently from the political branches and will operate consistent with the rule of law. And that rule of law is important not only for democratic values, but it's also important for investment and economic values as well. And so I think that's why you see such an emphasis on prioritization on having an independent judiciary.
Exactly, and let us go a little bit deeper. How do these perceptions impact institutional investments, the ones that Georgia is lacking?
Absolutely. Well, I think you'll see that businesses, when they look for an investment to make in a foreign country, they assess a variety of factors. They look at the overall investment climate, which is shaped by a number of things. It's shaped by the policies and regulations that a government puts in place. It's shaped by the logistics and transportation connections of a particular location. And it's shaped by the assurance that when contracts are signed, that they will be enforced fairly according to the terms of the contract and not according to political decisions or external influences. And so it's particularly with respect to that last piece that you see businesses looking at whether an independent judiciary exists, because the judiciary is there to enforce the rule of law. And when business knows that there is the rule of law, that means stability, predictability, and reliability, which is always good for business.
Do you come across these questions about Georgia when, for example, American businesses are eyeing Georgia for their investments? I mean, is it a practical thing when an investor comes to the country? Does this word of mouth work?
No, I think it very much matters because, let's face it, there is competition for investment. There is even competition for investment within this region. And so we want to make sure that Georgia is able to attract the U.S. investment that we want to be able to contribute to Georgia's economic success. But in order to do that, we need to make sure that the rule of law is enforced and that the judiciary is able to operate independently. But I'm really here to focus on how American business can contribute to that story going forward. And we look forward to finding ways to work with the Georgian government to do that.
What are some of the ways that you are and will be discussing with the Georgian government?
Yeah, so I think there are a couple of areas. So first, for example, we are keen to support Georgia's development of the Middle Corridor with its partners in the region. We know there has been a lot of talk of the Middle Corridor, and we know that particularly with the increase in trade in 2022 that is coming through the Middle Corridor, there is a lot of work to be done to convert the ideas of the Middle Corridor into a reality. I think we all talk about the potential, we all talk about actions that we could take, but I think working with Georgia and the partners in the region, U.S. companies have a lot to contribute to help Georgia and its partners make the Middle Corridor the incredibly effective trade route that we know it can be.
How do the real business cases work in this context? For example, we have this very unfortunate example of Anaklia Port and City where there were U.S. investments.
Yes, I think we're hoping that we can move forward with Anaklia and work with the Georgian government to do that. We know that's what the Georgian government wants to do. But it's not just about Anaklia, it's about the entire area where you're talking about multiple ports and multiple areas of connection. So you have the opportunity to really grow out a dynamic sector when it comes to logistics and transport, when it comes to areas of communication and digitalization. I think these are all areas where, as ports are built up, as greater connections are made, including with mechanisms such as the Black Sea undersea cable, you have the ability to take the Middle Corridor from an idea and from a very nascent trade route into a much more established trade route that will ultimately be more predictable and reliable for everyone in the region and in different parts of the world.
As I know, your visit also includes Turkey, Azerbaijan, Armenia. So you're looking at the region. Does this regional cooperation is gaining the momentum because of this geopolitical and also economic changes that
well, we are absolutely looking at this as an entire region. I think none of these markets exist in isolation, and we know that this is one of those situations where the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. And I think is really an opportunity here to take what each of these markets can contribute and create something much more significant if we work together, collectively. And that's what I think we're here to do. We do see this operating as a successful region when people work well together.
What kind of challenges is Russia?
Georgia has a long history with Russia. Georgia knows better than anyone the risks of overdependence on Russia. And so I think what we see here is a strong interest in partners in the region, including Georgia, wanting to diversify and in fact promote greater integration with the global economy, in particular with Western economies such as the United States and the EU. And so we are here to make sure that we can help fulfill the aspirations of the Georgian people and the Georgian government to develop greater economic security, to reduce dependence on any one trading partner, and to ensure that they have a long-term, stable, prosperous future.
At this point of time when, for example, Georgia had double-digit economic growth, do you think it was right for the government to bet on economic aspects of this changed geopolitical situation and be open for Russian migrants, for Russian money?
Well, look, I think the influx of Russian migrants with over 100,000 workers coming in has actually contributed to that double-digit growth. But at the same time, we should recognize that that was a shot in the arm, as we would say. We shouldn't count on that to really produce double-digit growth going in the future. And in fact, I think the international financial institutions have already noted that we shouldn't expect that for the future, that we should count on single-digit growth for the next year. So I think we should really, what that tells me is that we should take this as an opportunity, but just the first step, and there's a lot more work to do to maintain higher growth rates going into the future.
Considering Georgia's geopolitical location and that it is an immediate neighbor of Russia, and we've heard several ambassadors' fears earlier, on the earlier stage of this unfortunate war, that Georgia might have become a black hole in doing business with Russia and in kind of like helping Russia to avoid sanctions or to mitigate the impact of international sanctions. Do you see these fears materializing at this point?
No, what we see is the Georgian government committed to and respecting international sanctions and export controls and ensuring that they comply with those international sanctions and export controls. And we are pleased in our cooperation with the Georgian government that we are able to help them make sure that Georgia does not become that black hole for the evasion of sanctions.
Thank you so much for that answer. You also mentioned U.S. supporting Georgia, and we know that for a long time there are some kinds of talks, negotiations on and off about the FTA with the U.S. Is this topic still on the agenda?
Yeah, I would say that, we are committed to growing our partnership with Georgia and expanding trade and investment. And it's important to remember that free trade agreements are not the only means of doing that. And so what we're looking to do right now is explore the avenues that are available, take advantage of this unique moment in history where Georgia and its partners can really collectively develop a whole new trade route, can develop a whole new way of attracting investment. And I think the U.S. companies are going to be a key part of that. And I don't think we need a free trade agreement to do that.
And do we need direct flights for that? Because these are some of the issues that all of us are looking and waiting for.
No, look, certainly direct flights would be much easier and would be welcomed by a number of business travelers, certainly. But at the end of the day, that is going to be a commercial decision, and it really would depend on the airlines being even able to do that. So I would leave that decision to them.
Also, one of the very interesting topics in the context of nuclear, earlier, several months ago, maybe even a year ago, when Ms. Tegnan mentioned that that the U.S. is supporting Georgia on some kind of investor screening mechanism, and I think that could be crucial when we are talking about the nuclear project and also talking about the Black Sea cable, because these large projects are not only economic projects, they're also geopolitical projects.
Certainly, the Georgian government has told us that they naturally want to ensure the economic security of their people by making sure that the investments that come in are the kinds of investments that they want that will actually contribute to long-term inclusive economic growth. That means making sure that these investments are coming from high-quality investors, that they are, in fact, promoting the transfer of know-how and technology, and that they are secure and reliable for the long term. And that's how you ensure that investment benefits accrue to the Georgian people. And so the Georgian government has identified for itself the importance of making sure investments are high quality investments. We support the Georgian government in those efforts. We want to ensure that Georgia not only receives high dollar value investments, but receives the type of investments that achieve the government's objectives, and that's what we're here to do.
And so how do you think, what should be Georgia doing at this point of time to utilize all these opportunities that you earlier mentioned, that this new situation offers Georgia to become what its role is, to be really a logistics hub or transit country with these middle corridor opportunities that are becoming very real?
Well, look, I don't think we have to reinvent the wheel here. We already have, with the 12 conditions and the recommendations that the European Union has laid out, we have a roadmap of actions that will, in and of themselves, produce significant improvements for Georgia's economy, will support Georgia attaining candidate status, and ultimately, as we would support, full accession to the EU. So we look forward to working with Georgia, with the EU and with other partners to support the implementation of those 12 recommendations. I think that's already laid out there. And as we do that, I think what you will see is an opportunity to build on what is an already strong interest, certainly from the U.S. private sector in Georgia. And as Georgia takes those steps, you will see U.S. business respond with more investment.
Well, what will be some of the steps taken against Russians, and what is your assessment? Do these international sanctions actually work?
Well, look, we are proud of the fact that the global community has a strong coalition that President Biden has pulled together to combat the unlawful Russian aggression in Ukraine. And the export controls and sanctions are a critical piece of that. We are proud to work with our partners, including Georgia, to help ensure that the Russian war machine is stopped in its tracks and is ultimately pushed back, because that's what the objective is here, is we want to make sure that we raise the costs for Putin as he engages in this unlawful war. And we're glad to see that it is succeeding on the ground. The Russian war machine is being slowed down. And of course, the incredible courage and determination showed by the Ukrainian people is a key part of that, and we are here to support that in any way we can, including through these international sanctions and export controls with friends like Georgia.
So who has the bigger cost at this point? Is it like global economy, because Russia was quite integrated and Europe was over-dependent on energy and so forth, or Russia itself?
Well, this unlawful Russian aggression has certainly hurt the world economy. We see that in the context of energy prices. We see that in the context of food security. The unlawful Russian actions and the impact it has had on the world compound, of course, the horrors that are happening on the ground in Ukraine. So we cannot look away from the challenges this poses for the world. But what that tells us is, more important than ever are the partnerships we have. It's the coordination that we have with our friends like Georgia, because that is the only way we're going to combat the challenges posed to the world economy by this Russian aggression. At the same time, I do want to note that, as I said, the impact on Russia is significant and is indeed harmful. We stand strong with the Russian people to ensure that they have a leadership that does not put them in a situation of war with their neighbor. And I think the sanctions and the export controls that are in place are moving in that direction.
Yes, and also it gives us a very direct direction that diversification and economic diversification and moving further away from Russia is important. Do you think Georgia is taking enough steps in that direction?
Yes, no, look, we understand Georgia and Russia have a long history. They will always have a history. There will always be a connection between Georgia and Russia. And so that's important to recognize. But at the same time, we want to support the Georgian government's own efforts to reduce that dependence and certainly in the first instance make sure that the dependence is not increased during this time of conflict. And I think we are working with the Georgian government to reduce that dependence through a number of ways, including the implementation of the 12 recommendations, but also through the support of companies that are interested in investing in Georgia and in supporting Georgian companies that are also interested in investing in the United States, which I'm proud to say.
Thank you for stressing during our interview these 12 points and the need for Georgia to get this EU candidate country status. Please, could you dig deeper a little bit why that is so important for Georgia? What risks would it mitigate for Georgia, both on political and also on economic?
Right. I think what a couple of things. One is by implementing those 12 recommendations, Georgia advances its own desire to be more integrated with the West, to diversify its partnerships, and to avoid being forced to take certain actions because of Russia. And so by making itself less vulnerable to Russia and integrating with the European Union and with the United States, Georgia grounds itself in a diverse economic portfolio that gives it greater freedom of action, that strengthens its economic security going forward, and that ultimately enhances its political security.
The current events that were about this so-called law on agents, you were probably following that. What kind of message was that from the Georgian people, and what kind of message was that not only to the political community but to the business community as well? And how does this democracy and economic well-being overlap?
Well, I think what you saw was the voice of the people being heard. I mean, we had over 100,000 people protesting against this harsh Kremlin-inspired law that does not reflect Georgian values and clearly does not reflect what the Georgian people wanted. So,
and clearly does not reflect FARA as well, right?
Oh, yeah. I think this is the point, is that the will of the Georgian people has spoken. The government listened. And that's the point of democracy, is that you want to listen to the people and you want to make sure that you don't have measures in place that don't reflect your values, that reflect the values of others that are different from yours. And I think that's was a remarkable success. We look forward to working with the Georgian government to move past that. But I think it was important for the business community outside of Georgia to see how Georgia's own people are exactly what you would expect them to be in terms of standing up against this.
After this decision of sanctioning Chinchaladze, Murusidze, and to other judicial officials, what do you expect? What the reaction might be from the government side?
Yeah, I'm not going to engage in speculation about how the government might react, and nor do I want to get in the way of our private communications with the Georgian government. What I would just say is that we are here to support a growing trade and investment relationship. having an independent judiciary free from political and external influence is a key part of that. And so we look forward to working with the Georgian government to improve that environment going forward.
And so what are some of the main sectors that could be appealing for American businesses to do business here?
Yeah, so I think when I talk to American businesses, that strong interest they have in Georgia, you see reflected particularly in sectors like healthcare, information technology, renewable energy, and then of course logistics and transportation. There's a lot of excitement around the Middle Corridor, as we discussed.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for being with us and taking our questions, and thank you for your support in Georgia.
Great. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.